Stephen Twigg.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I first of all congratulate my right honourable friend and the other officers of the all-party parliamentary group on Yemen for organising what is a timely debate, as we've just marked the third anniversary of this crisis in Yemen. It's a particular pleasure to follow the right honourable gentleman, the former Secretary of State for International Development, who kindly gave evidence to the International Development Committee recently following his visit to Yemen. And once again today, I think he has provided a thoughtful and important contribution to this debate. This coming Saturday in Liverpool, we will hold the monthly vigil for peace in Yemen that is arranged by Liverpool Friends of Yemen, which draws both on the large Yemeni community in Liverpool and other friends. And in advance of this afternoon's debate, I contacted some of the Liverpool Friends of Yemen to ask them what they would like me to address if I were called to speak. And the major focus was the one that is reflected in the motion before the House this afternoon: the sheer scale of the humanitarian crisis which the people of Yemen are facing and the need for peace in that country. I give way to my honourable friend.
I'm sure my honourable friend would agree with me that my honourable friend from Leicester, who moved the actual motion, made the point very forcibly that the United Nations decisions tomorrow become very important in relation to what previous speakers have just said about a ceasefire, and maybe we'll lift that blockade as well.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I agree absolutely, and let us all hope for progress as a consequence of the United Nations Security Council discussions tomorrow. The scale of this crisis has been documented by the previous speakers and in previous debates. UNICEF tell us that more than 1,500 children have been killed since the fighting began, with a similar number being recruited by both sides of this conflict to fight. We know, as my right honourable friend said in his opening speech, that the conflict has claimed the lives of at least 10,000 people, and some have put the level of civilian deaths as high as 5,000. The United Nations has given the crisis in Yemen level 3 status, putting it on a par with similar crises in Syria, Iraq and South Sudan. And the President of the International Committee of the Red Cross has said that the intensity and severity of this fighting has left Yemen looking like Syria did after 5 years of conflict. 19 million people in need of immediate humanitarian assistance. That is 80%. 4 in 5 of the entire population, 500,000 children suffering from severe malnutrition. Saleh Saeed, who is the Chief Executive of the Disasters Emergency Committee and is himself originally from Yemen, have said that families are having to make the unbearable decision between buying medicine or food for their families. This simply cannot be allowed to continue. I give way to my friend.
I thank my friend for giving way. He mentioned medicine. Does he agree with me there's also a crucial crisis in the health sector in Yemen? Government Ministry of Health workers haven't been paid since August last year. There's a lack of available medicines in many, many areas, and despite the amazing work of organisations like MSF, many people can't access the help they need.
I thank my honourable friend. He anticipates the next paragraph of my speech, where I point out that there are 15 million people in Yemen with no access to healthcare, and of course 70 health centres have been destroyed as part of the conflict. The International Development Committee publishes today our report on UK aid and the allocation of resources. And I think the work that DFID is doing in Yemen is a fine example of why the Prime Minister was right yesterday to say that UK aid is a badge of hope for our country. This morning at the committee, we took evidence on education, and we heard about the latest plans from DFID working with other donors to ensure that children affected by this conflict do not become a lost generation, that there is investment in the capacity both of the government but also of local communities in Yemen to ensure that children do not lose out on their education. The right honourable gentleman talked about what many have described as the paradox of aid, the positive record that we as a country have on aid, and yet our involvement being aligned to one side in the conflict. And I'm very keen to hear from the Minister what the government is doing to try to get the port at Hodeidah reopened. That issue has been raised by a number of colleagues during this debate. We have said consistently in the International Development Committee that there should be an independent UN-led inquiry into all alleged violations of international humanitarian law by both sides in this conflict. But let us unite behind the motion before us today. This is an important motion marking the 3rd anniversary, but also ahead of tomorrow, saying we want to see a ceasefire, we want to see peace, and we want to see justice, and we commit to rebuilding the country of Yemen once peace comes.